Officer Ryan Shepard and his K-9 partner Max were conducting a routine training exercise at the abandoned Miller factory on the outskirts of Oakville. A desperate call came through dispatch about a 7-year-old girl abducted from her elementary school by an armed man with police tactical knowledge. 21 days later, the halls of Mercy Animal Hospital fell silent as staff prepared for an unprecedented meeting. When the little girl who hadn't spoken since her rescue walked into the recovery room and saw Max's bandaged face, what happened next made even the most hardened veterans in the room break down in tears. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Oakville. Washington sat nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, a mid-sized town where American flags hung from porch railings and everyone recognized the police chief at Sunday church service. Despite its picturesque main street and friendly diners, the town had been hit hard by the closure of the lumber mill, leaving behind abandoned buildings and a struggling economy. The police department operated on a shoestring budget in a brick building that hadn't been renovated since the 1970s. Ryan Shepard hadn't planned on settling in Oakville. At 38, the former Army Ranger carried the weight of 3 Afghanistan tours in the lines etched around his eyes, and the nightmares that still woke him at 3 a.m. His military crew cut had grown out slightly, and flecks of gray now peppered his dark hair at the temples. The divorce papers had been finalized 2 years ago. His ex-wife, unable to live with the man who returned from war, a different man than the one who had left. Max had saved him. The German shepherd, with intelligent amber eyes and a scar across his muzzle from his days as a rescue before police training, had become more than a partner. When the panic attacks came, Max would press his weight against Ryan's legs, grounding him in the present. They lived together in a small ranch house on the edge of town, their morning runs in the mountains as much therapy as exercise. Chief William Hayes was counting the days until retirement. At 58, the barrel-chested department veteran had seen Oakville through its best and worst days. He ran the department by the book and viewed Ryan's unconventional methods with skepticism, though he couldn't argue with the results. Emily Collins was known for her quiet nature even before tragedy struck. The 7-year-old with wavy blonde hair and serious blue eyes had stopped speaking entirely after witnessing her father's death in a car accident 8 months ago. Her artwork, filled with darkening skies and solitary figures, worried her teachers at Oakville Elementary. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had moved to Oakville seeking a fresh start. At 36, the veterinary surgeon with auburn hair and steady hands had built a reputation at Mercy Animal Hospital for taking on the cases others deemed hopeless. What few people knew was how the single mother worked extra shifts to support her daughter, Emily, or how she fell asleep most nights still wearing her scrubs, too exhausted to change. None of them could have imagined how their lives would intertwine in the coming days, bound together by one act of violence and extraordinary courage. The after-school art program at Oakville Elementary had been Emily Collins' only comfort since her father's death. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she would sit in the brightly colored room, silently creating watercolor landscapes while other children chattered around her. Mrs. Henderson, the art teacher, had learned not to push Emily to speak, instead communicating through nods and gentle smiles. That Thursday in late November, darkness had already fallen by 4:30 p.m., and the first snowflakes of an approaching winter storm drifted past the classroom windows. Parents arrived one by one to collect their children, the room gradually emptying until only Emily remained, adding careful brushstrokes to a mountain scene. Mrs. Henderson checked her watch, concerned. Sarah Mitchell was never late. The school office had already closed for the day. Mrs. Henderson stepped into the hallway to call Dr. Mitchell, leaving Emily alone for less than 2 minutes. It was all the time he needed. The security footage later showed a man in a maintenance uniform entering through the rear door. He moved with purpose, familiar with the school layout. When Mrs. Henderson returned to the classroom, Emily was gone, her painting still wet, a small handprint smeared across the paper where she had been dragged away. Ryan Shepard was running Max through scent detection exercises when his radio crackled to life. The dispatcher's voice was tight with urgency. "All units, child abduction at Oakville Elementary. Suspect is armed and dangerous. 7-year-old female, blonde hair, blue jacket. Suspect is white male, approximately 40 to 45 dark hair, wearing maintenance uniform. Last seen headed east on foot." Ryan's chest tightened. "Dispatch. K-9 unit responding. ETA 6 minutes. As Ryan sped toward the school, lights flashing but siren silent to avoid alerting the suspect, the radio updated with new information. Suspect identified as Frank Daniels, former Oakville PD, considered armed and extremely dangerous. Tactical knowledge of police procedures. Use extreme caution. The name hit Ryan like a physical blow. Frank Daniels, 8 years with the department, 4 as a K-9 handler, dismissed 3 years ago after excessive force complaints. The man who had initially trained Max before Ryan became his handler. By the time Ryan arrived at the school, a perimeter had been established. Chief Hayes stood beneath the harsh fluorescent lights of the parking lot, barking orders as officers secured the building. Parents huddled in frightened groups, the news spreading rapidly through the small town. "School's clear," Hayes informed Ryan, his breath visible in the cold air. "He's gone. Took the Mitchell girl." Security camera caught him heading toward the East Woods. "With this storm moving in, we're losing time." Ryan nodded, already unloading Max from the K-9 vehicle. "I need something with her scent." Mrs. Henderson appeared, clutching Emily's backpack. She was just there. Then gone." The teacher stammered, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Her mother's going to... Oh, God!" Ryan took the backpack and held it to Max's nose. "Find her, boy," he commanded softly. Max's entire demeanor changed, his body becoming taut with concentration. The German Shepherd circled once, twice, then pulled toward the eastern edge of the school property where a chain-link fence separated the playground from dense woods. Snow was falling more heavily now, fat flakes swirling in the beam of Ryan's flashlight. Bad conditions for tracking, and getting worse by the minute. A patrol officer joined them at the fence. "We've identified tracks heading into the forest," he reported. "And we've got another problem. Dispatch just got a call from Daniels." Ryan's stomach dropped. "What did he say?" "He's making demands. Wants a public apology from the department for his dismissal, full pension restoration, and $100,000. Says we have 12 hours before he..." The officer couldn't finish. Ryan checked his watch. 5:18 p.m. The deadline would expire at dawn, with a snowstorm raging through the night. Chief Hayes approached, cell phone in hand. "We've got the mother on the way. Hysterical. Works at Mercy Animal Hospital. Someone needs to intercept her before she contaminates the scene." "Sir," Ryan said, "I know these woods, and Max knows Daniel's scent. Let us take point on the track." Hayes hesitated. "Daniel's trained with K-9. He'll be expecting dogs. But he doesn't know Max like I do. What Max can do now." Ryan stood straighter. "Sir, That girl doesn't have time for us to wait for tactical from Eastbrook County. The chief's face was grim in the emergency lights. You've got point, but I want regular check-ins. The old mining tunnels run through that whole area. If he's headed there... Ryan nodded. He knew exactly what Hayes was thinking. The abandoned copper mines outside Oakville formed a labyrinth extending for miles beneath the hills. A man with knowledge of the tunnels could hide indefinitely. Max was already straining at his harness, nose working the air. Ryan attached the tracking line, switched on his body camera, and checked his weapon. "Shepard," Hayes called as Ryan prepared to follow Max into the woods. "Be careful. Daniels always had a screw loose, but he was smart, and he's got nothing to lose now." The snow was coming down harder, already beginning to cover any tracks. Max moved with certainty through the trees, staying low to the ground where the scent would be strongest. Ryan followed, heart pounding, knowing that somewhere ahead in the darkness, a frightened little girl was being dragged deeper into danger by a man who knew exactly how police search operations worked. And the clock was already ticking. 6 hours into the search, the snow had transformed into a blinding wall of white. The temperature had plummeted to 17 degrees, and wind howled through the pine trees, drowning out all other sounds. Ryan's radio had fallen silent 30 minutes ago, the signal unable to penetrate the deepening ravine where Max had led him. "Command, this is K9 unit." Ryan tried again, receiving only static in response. "Radio contact lost. Continuing pursuit on bearing 045, approximately 2 miles east of initial entry point." Max forged ahead, his dark form barely visible against the snow. The German shepherd paused occasionally, circling to reacquire the scent, but never hesitated for long. Ryan trusted Max's abilities more than any technology. Their connection had been forged through thousands of training hours and cemented in the crucible of shared trauma. Ryan remembered the first time he'd met Max, 3 years ago. He'd been at his lowest point since returning from Afghanistan, sleeping in his truck after his wife asked him to leave, drinking too much, startling awake from nightmares with his hand reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. The VA counselor had suggested the K9 program as a path back to purpose. The shelter had been loud, echoing with desperate barks. Max was silent, watching Ryan with wary eyes from the back of his kennel. The shelter volunteer explained that Max had been rescued from an abusive situation, then partially trained as a police dog before his handler was dismissed. The dog was considered unadoptable, too damaged, too intense. "He needs someone who understands him," the volunteer had said. When Ryan knelt before the kennel, Max had approached cautiously, sniffing the air. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition of shared wounds. 3 weeks later, they began training together. 6 months after that, Max alerted to Ryan's first panic attack before it fully began, pressing his weight against Ryan's legs until the world stopped spinning. Now, pushing through knee-deep snow, Ryan silently thanked whatever fate had brought them together. Max suddenly stopped, hackles rising. Ryan froze, hand moving to his weapon. The German shepherd was staring intently at what appeared to be a rock outcropping. Drawing closer, Ryan spotted the narrow opening partially concealed by snow-laden branches. "Good boy," he whispered, rewarding Max with a quick pat. The entrance to the mining tunnels, exactly where Hayes had feared Daniels would go. Ryan played his flashlight across the ground. finding footprints not yet filled by snow, a man's boot prints, and beside them, the smaller impressions of a child being dragged. The sight sent a surge of anger through him. Ryan took a steadying breath. Remembering his training, anger made you sloppy. Emily needed him clear-headed. The tunnel entrance was barely wide enough for his shoulders. Ryan secured his backpack and followed Max into the darkness, the temperature dropping further as they left the howling wind behind. The beam of his tactical flashlight revealed rusted mining equipment and support beams worn by time. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, a steady metronome in the silence. 20 yards in, the tunnel widened into a junction. Max circled, confused by the way scent circulated in the enclosed space. Ryan swept his light across the ground, finding something that made his stomach turn a small pink mitten. Emily's. Beside it lay something else, a folded newspaper clipping. Ryan opened it carefully. It was an article from 6 months ago about a drug bust Ryan and Max had conducted, complete with a photograph of them receiving commendation from Chief Hayes. The article had been defaced. Ryan's face circled in red marker. Similar clippings were scattered around all cases Ryan had worked, all bearing the same angry red markings. This wasn't a random abduction. Daniels had been planning this, watching, waiting. You always were Hayes's golden boy, weren't you? Shepard? The voice echoed from deeper in the tunnel, followed by a crackling sound. Ryan spotted a handheld radio sitting on a rusted mine cart. "Frank," Ryan responded, keeping his voice steady. "Let the girl go. She has nothing to do with whatever grievance you have with the department." A harsh laugh emanated from the radio. "Nothing personal against the kid. She's just leverage. Though I do enjoy seeing the department scramble. You've got, what, 6 hours left before deadline." "We can work something out," Ryan said, speaking clearly while signaling Max to search for alternative routes. "I'm authorized to negotiate." "Liar," Daniels responded. "Hayes would never authorize negotiations. Man so by the book he'd let a kid die rather than bend protocol." Ryan needed to keep him talking. "Things have changed since you left. Frank, I'm here alone. No tactical team, no backup. Just me and Max." A pause. "Max, my Max. They gave you my dog." The voice had shifted, a dangerous edge entering it. "He's a good partner," Ryan said carefully. "He was mine." Daniel's voice rose to a shout. "I trained him from a pup, and they handed him over to you like he was department equipment." Max had discovered another tunnel branching from the junction. His body language told Ryan it held Emily's scent. "Frank, let's talk about this." Ryan continued. "Where's the girl? How is he?" Daniels asked, ignoring the question. "Does he still favor his left side on tracking? Does he still get anxious in thunderstorms?" The personal knowledge sent a chill down Ryan's spine. This wasn't just about departmental revenge. This was about Max. The radio crackled again. "Don't bother trying to trace this signal. I've got miles of tunnel to work with, and I know every inch. Been planning this for months. The department took everything from me, my career, my pension, my dignity, even my dog. Now they'll know what that feels like." Ryan's earpiece suddenly hissed with static. Then Chief Hayes's voice broke through, faint but audible. "Shepard, do you copy storms breaking? Tactical team ETA 40 minutes. Hold position." Before Ryan could respond, Daniel spoke again through the radio. "Hear that cavalry's coming? Too bad they'll never find you in time. Or the girl, or what's left of my dog when I'm done with him." The transmission ended abruptly. Ryan tried his own radio. "Chief, I've made contact with Daniels. He's using the mining tunnels. I've located an entrance 2 miles east of entry point. Subject is fixated on Max. Seems to be primary motive." Hayes's response was broken by static. "Stand down. Wait for tactical. Too dangerous." At the operations center established at Oakville PD, Sarah Mitchell paced frantically, her face pale with fear. She'd arrived at the school to find a crime scene, and her worst nightmare realized. Now, 6 hours later, she clutched Emily's favorite stuffed rabbit as officers avoided meeting her gaze. "Miss Mitchell." A young officer approached hesitantly. "The search team coordinator would like to speak with you." Sarah followed him to where a map was spread across a table. Chief Hayes looked up, his expression grave. "Dr. Mitchell, the officer leading our K9 search has reported finding a mitten we believe belongs to Emily. He's tracking them into the old mining system." "Who's leading the search?" Sarah asked, desperate for any information. "Officer Ryan Shepard and his K9 Max?" "They're our best tracking team." Sarah froze. "Ryan Shepard, from the 10th Mountain Division?" Hayes looked surprised. "Yes. He served with them in Afghanistan. Do you know him?" Sarah's hand trembled as she clutched the stuffed rabbit tighter. "My husband, James Collins. They served together. James saved Ryan's life in Kandahar." The revelation hung in the air between them, back in the tunnels, unaware of this connection. Ryan made his decision. Hayes had ordered him to wait, but the storm had already cost them hours. Every minute reduced Emily's chances. "Come on, Max," he whispered, turning his flashlight toward the tunnel where Max had detected Emily's scent. "We're their only hope now." The mining tunnels formed a disorienting labyrinth beneath the hills of Oakville. Ryan's tactical flashlight cut through darkness that felt alive, pressing against him from all sides. Water trickled down the rock walls, collecting in stagnant pools that reflected the light in eerie patterns. The air grew colder and damper the deeper they ventured, carrying the scent of earth and decay. Max moved with practiced precision, his training overcoming natural canine instincts that would make most dogs balk at entering such an unnatural environment. Every few minutes, Ryan checked his watch. 5 hours remaining until Daniel's deadline expired. "We're coming. Emily," he whispered, the sound swallowed by the darkness. At the command center, the atmosphere had grown increasingly tense. Chief Hayes stood before the topographical map, now marked with red pins indicating possible tunnel entrances. The storm had temporarily abated, allowing the tactical team from Eastbrook County to begin their approach. "Officer Shepard is in direct violation of orders," Hayes told the assembled team leaders, his voice tight with frustration. He had explicit instructions to wait for backup. Lieutenant Wilson from Eastbrook Tactical adjusted his gear. "With all due respect, Chief, your man might be doing exactly what's needed. These tunnels cover nearly 20 square miles. Without a tracker already inside narrowing the search area, we'd be looking at days, not hours." Hayes didn't respond, his weathered face betraying nothing of his inner conflict. He'd been a cop long enough to know when to bend the rules, but he'd also recovered the bodies of officers who took unnecessary risks. The door to the conference room swung open, and Sarah Mitchell strode in, her hospital scrubs replaced by snow pants and a heavy jacket. "I'm going with the rescue team," she announced. Hayes shook his head. Absolutely not. Dr. Mitchell, this is a law enforcement operation. I grew up in these hills, Sarah countered. My father worked those mines before they closed. I explored those tunnels as a teenager. And more importantly, I'm a trauma doctor. When you find my daughter, you'll need me. The chief hesitated, weighing the potential liability against the practical benefits. She's right, Lieutenant Wilson interjected. Local knowledge could be crucial, and having medical personnel on scene saves precious minutes. Hayes finally nodded. You stay with Lieutenant Wilson's team at all times. That's non-negotiable. Oh, Sarah's relief was visible, but short-lived as an officer rushed into the room. Chief, new development. County records show that Frank Daniels purchased 3 properties near the mining area in the past year, all through shell companies. One of them is an old mining office half a mile from where Shepard entered the tunnels. Deep in the tunnel system, Ryan discovered a junction larger than the others, clearly once used as a staging area for mining operations. Old equipment lay covered in decades of dust, and wooden support beams sagged ominously. In the center of the space, a metal table held something that made Ryan's blood run cold. A leather-bound journal lay open, its pages covered in Daniels's distinctive handwriting. Ryan flipped through it carefully, piecing together a disturbing narrative. The journal detailed Daniels' descent after his dismissal, his failed attempts to get reinstated, the divorce that followed, the drinking. But more disturbing were the pages that followed, outlining his obsession with proving the superiority of K-9 units over tactical teams and his growing resentment toward Ryan specifically. One page contained newspaper clippings of Ryan and Max receiving commendations, with scrawled notes, "Should have been mine. They took everything." Time to show them what real training looks like. Ryan's hand stilled on a page dated 3 months ago. It contained surveillance notes on Emily Collins, including her school schedule, her mother's work hours, and most disturbingly, a connection Ryan hadn't known existed. Target confirmed, daughter of Collins. Perfect symmetry. Shepard failed to save the father, now will fail to save the daughter. The revelation hit Ryan like a physical blow. James Collins, his squad mate in Afghanistan, the man who had pushed Ryan out of the path of an IED, taking the brunt of the blast himself. Ryan had never made the connection to Emily, had never known James had a daughter, or that he had settled in Oakville after his medical discharge. The guilt Ryan had carried for years suddenly doubled in weight. Max's low growl pulled Ryan from his thoughts. The German shepherd was staring at a narrow passage leading deeper into the mine, his body tense with alertation. Ryan drew his weapon, moving cautiously toward the passage. On the ground nearby, he spotted a small piece of paper, a torn corner of a child's drawing. The colorful crayon markings were unmistakable. "Good boy," Ryan whispered, rewarding Max with a quick pat. The German shepherd's behavior suddenly changed, becoming more hesitant, ears flicking back and forth. Something was wrong. Ryan swept his flashlight across the entrance to the passage, its beam catching a thin wire stretched across the floor. A tripwire. Daniels was setting traps. "Steady, Max," Ryan commanded softly, carefully stepping over the wire. He examined the trap without touching it. Pressure plates connected to what appeared to be a simple noisemaker. Not lethal, but designed to alert Daniels to their approach. Ryan's respect for his adversary reluctantly increased. Daniels was using his police training effectively, employing counter-tracking techniques and psychological warfare. This wouldn't be a straightforward pursuit. At the command center, the tactical teams were gearing up when a technician burst in. "Chief, we've established partial radio contact with Officer Shepard. Signal's weak, but coming through." Hayes grabbed the radio. "Shepard, report. What's your position?" The response came broken and static-filled. "Journal. Targeting the girl. James Collins' daughter. Revenge against me." Sarah gasped audibly, drawing Hayes' attention. "What is it?" "Dr. Mitchell." "James always said someone from his unit blamed themselves for his injuries," she explained, voice trembling. "He tried to reach out to this soldier after he recovered, but the man had disappeared. James wanted to tell him he didn't blame him, that he'd make the same choice again." Hayes turned back to the radio. "Shepard, we're sending in tactical teams from multiple entry points. What's your location?" "About 2 miles in. Main junction. Daniels has set traps." Proceeding with caution, the transmission cut out abruptly. Hayes slammed his fist on the table in frustration. "Teams move out now. Priority is the child. But Officer Shepard and K9 are in imminent danger." Ryan carefully navigated another 100 yards of tunnel, disarming 2 more simple alarm traps. Max had become increasingly agitated, a behavior Ryan recognized from their training. The German Shepherd could detect explosives, and his reaction suggested something more dangerous ahead. "Easy, boy," Ryan soothed, examining the tunnel walls with his flashlight. There, embedded in a crack in the rock face. He spotted it, a small package with wires extending into the ceiling supports. C4 explosive, military grade. Daniels was escalating dramatically. Ryan carefully backed away, his mind racing. The explosion would likely collapse this section of tunnel, either as a defensive measure if Daniels felt cornered, or as a way to eliminate pursuers. Either way, they needed another route. Max whined softly, nudging Ryan's hand. The dog was trying to lead him to an alternative path. Ryan followed, trusting his partner's instincts. They detoured through a narrower passage that forced Ryan to crouch, emerging into a partially flooded section where the ceiling had collapsed years ago, allowing groundwater to seep in. The water was ankle-deep and frigid. Max hesitated at the edge, but Ryan urged him forward. "We can do this, boy. Find Emily." The tactical teams had split into 3 groups, each entering the mine complex from different access points. Sarah Mitchell accompanied Lieutenant Wilson's team, her knowledge of the tunnel system already proving valuable when she identified a maintenance shaft not on their maps. "My father called these the Whisper Tunnels," she explained as they moved cautiously forward. "The miners believed you could hear voices from miles away because of how the passages were constructed." Wilson nodded. "That might work in our favor. Sound could travel far enough for your daughter to hear us calling, or for Daniels to hear us coming," added a tactical officer grimly. Ryan and Max emerged from the flooded passage, both soaking wet and shivering in the cold underground air. The tunnels had begun to slope downward, taking them deeper beneath the hills. According to Ryan's estimate, they were now at least 300 feet below the surface. Max suddenly froze, ears forward, body rigid with attention. Ryan instantly stilled, listening. At first, he heard nothing but the dripping water. Then, faintly, a child's muffled sob echoed through the darkness. Ryan's pulse quickened. They were close. The passage widened into another junction, this one bearing signs of recent occupation, food wrappers, a battery-powered lantern, boot prints in the dust. Max circled the area. nose working rapidly, then oriented toward a metal door set into the rock face, likely an old equipment room or office. Ryan approached with extreme caution, ears straining for any sound. The sobbing had stopped. He checked the door for traps, finding none, which immediately raised his suspicions. Daniels wouldn't leave his primary hideout unprotected. His radio crackled unexpectedly to life. "Shepherd, teams are in the tunnels. What's your position?" Ryan keyed his microphone. "I've located what appears to be Daniels's hideout. Metal door, east section, deep junction. Proceeding with caution." "Negative. Wait for tactical." Ryan switched off the radio. The noise could alert Daniels, and every minute mattered now. He had to trust that Max would warn him of any danger. He tested the door handle gently. Unlocked. Too easy. Ryan drew his weapon and exchanged a glance with Max. The German shepherd's eyes reflected the flashlight beam. Steady and trusting. They had trained for this countless times, room clearing with an armed suspect, but never with a child hostage, and never with such personal stakes. Ryan took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever lay beyond that door. Everything he knew about Frank Daniels told him this confrontation would be dangerous. The man had nothing left to lose. A tactical background, and a specific vendetta against both Ryan and Max. Max's ears suddenly perked up, his attention shifting away from the door to a passage behind them. Ryan turned, sweeping his flashlight across the darkness. For a split second, he caught a glimpse of movement. Then pain exploded in his shoulder as something struck him with tremendous force, sending him sprawling to the ground. The flashlight clattered away, its beam illuminating Max lunging toward a shadow. Ryan struggled to his feet, disoriented, his shoulder throbbing. In the chaotic dance of light and darkness, he made out Frank Daniels grappling with Max, the German shepherd's teeth locked on the man's forearm. "Still got some fight in you," Daniels growled, his voice strained with pain. "Good boy." Ryan reached for his fallen weapon, but Daniels kicked it away. The former officer was larger than Ryan remembered, his face haggard and unshaven, eyes wild with a dangerous mixture of pain and triumph. "I knew you'd come alone," Daniels said, still struggling with Max. "Always the hero, aren't you, Shepherd? Just like in Afghanistan." Ryan froze. "How do you know about Afghanistan?" Daniels' laugh echoed off the tunnel walls. "I know everything about you. While you were taking my life, my career, my dog, I was learning all about the man Hayes replaced me with." Max maintained his grip, but Daniels had managed to wedge his arm in such a way that the dog couldn't apply full pressure. It was a handler's move, someone who knew exactly how K9 units were trained. "The girl." "Frank," Ryan said, trying to redirect. "Where is she?" Daniels nodded toward the metal door. "Safe. For now. Unlike her father, who you let die." The words struck deeper than any physical blow. Ryan's voice hardened. "James Collins saved my life. And how did you repay him? Did you look after his family? Did you even know he had a daughter?" Daniels spat. "You took everything from me, and you didn't even appreciate what you had." Max suddenly shifted tactics, releasing Daniels' arm only to lunge again, forcing the man back toward the metal door. Ryan seized the opportunity, diving for his weapon. In that moment, with Max's attention divided. Daniels pulled something from his jacket, a small, remote detonator. "You have a choice. Shepard," he shouted over Max's growls. "Me or the girl, because in 30 seconds, this whole section is coming down." Ryan Shepard's mind worked with the crystalline clarity that only comes in moments of extreme danger. Frank Daniels stood 10 feet away, remote detonator in hand, a savage smile distorting his unshaven face. Max maintained his defensive posture between them, hackles raised, a low growl emanating from deep in his chest. Behind Daniels, the metal door concealed Emily Collins if the man was telling the truth. "You're bluffing," Ryan said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "You've rigged the tunnels, but not this section. You wouldn't risk killing yourself." Daniel's smile widened. "You always were analytical. Shepard, Hayes liked that about you. But you're wrong this time." He held up the detonator, thumb hovering over the button. "I've had 3 years to plan this. Dead man's switch. If my thumb comes off this button, the charges blow. If I press it fully, same result." Ryan assessed the situation rapidly. Daniels was using standard hostage protocol against him, creating an impossible choice. The tactics Ryan had been trained to employ wouldn't work against someone who knew those same tactics. "Let me see the girl," Ryan demanded. "Prove she's alive." "Fair enough." Daniels backed toward the door, maintaining his distance from both Ryan and Max. "But the dog stays where he is. I know what he can do." Ryan issued a hand signal, and Max reluctantly held position, though his muscles remained tense, ready to spring. Daniels reached behind him with his free hand, twisting the door handle without taking his eyes off Ryan. The door creaked open to reveal a small room that had once been a mining office. A battery-powered lantern cast a yellow glow over rusted filing cabinets and a sagging desk. Huddled in the corner, hands bound in front of her with zip ties, sat Emily Collins. The 7-year-old's blonde hair was matted with dirt, her blue jacket torn at the sleeve. Her eyes, red from crying, widened at the sight of the men and the dog. "She's unharmed," Daniels said, "for now. And she stays that way if you cooperate." Emily's gaze fixed on Max, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. Ryan remembered the K9 demonstration at her school months ago before he knew her connection to James. "What do you want, Frank?" Ryan asked, though he already knew the answer. "Justice." Daniels spat the word. 3 years ago, Hayes sided with some drug-dealing scumbag over me. Said I used excessive force. Said my dog was too aggressive because I'd trained him wrong. His face contorted with rage. 20 years I gave that department. 20 years, and they threw me away like garbage. Ryan kept his voice calm, using the negotiation techniques he'd learned. "I understand you're angry, but Emily has nothing to do with this." Daniels laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the small space. "That's where you're wrong. Everything is connected. You, me, the dog, the girl." He gestured toward Emily with his chin. "James Collins's daughter, the man who saved your life. The universe has a sense of irony, doesn't it?" Outside in the tunnel, Max's ears suddenly pricked forward. Ryan had worked with the German Shepherd long enough to recognize the subtle change in posture. Max had detected something beyond human perception. The tactical teams must be getting closer. Daniels noticed Ryan's momentary distraction. "They won't get here in time. 25 minutes left on my deadline, and I'm not leaving these tunnels. Not alive. Anyway, Ryan needed to keep him talking. Every minute gained was another minute for the tactical teams to locate them, another minute for Emily to remain safe. This won't bring your career back, Frank. This was never about getting my job back, Daniel shouted, his control slipping. This is about making them feel what I felt. Loss. Betrayal. The knowledge that everything can be taken from you in an instant. Ryan ventured a step closer. Daniels immediately raised the detonator. Stay where you are. This isn't just about revenge. It's about proving a point. He looked at Max with an expression approaching tenderness. K9 units. The department treats them like equipment. When my dog got injured on that drug bust, they wouldn't pay for the surgery. Said he wasn't worth the investment, so I paid out of pocket for everything. Then they said my training methods were too aggressive. His voice broke. I saved that dog from being put down as a puppy. I made him what he was. Ryan saw an opening. I know. Max was lucky to have you. Daniel's eyes narrowed suspiciously. I'm serious. Ryan continued. When I got him, I could see he'd had excellent foundation training, strong drive, good focus. That comes from early handling. Something shifted in Daniel's expression, pride battling with suspicion. He trusts you now. We've been through a lot together, Ryan acknowledged. Just like you two were. For a moment, Daniels seemed lost in memory. I used to bring him home every night. Against protocol. He slept on my bed. His face hardened again. Then they took him away. Gave him to you. They told me he came from a shelter, Ryan said truthfully. I didn't know he'd been yours. In the corner. Emily shifted slightly, drawing both men's attention. The girl was watching Max intently, her earlier fear replaced by something else, determination. Ryan recognized James Collins's steadiness in his daughter's eyes. Max's ears twitched again, and this time Ryan heard it, two faint sounds of movement in the tunnels, growing closer. Daniels heard it as well, his expression darkening. Time's up. Shepard, decision time. He moved toward Emily, pulling her roughly to her feet. She didn't cry out, her gaze still fixed on Max. The department needs to learn that actions have consequences. You need to learn that lesson too. Ryan saw Emily's hands move subtly, working at the zip ties binding her wrists. The girl had been trying to free herself while they talked. Let her go, Frank. Take me instead. Daniels laughed. Noble but predictable. No, here's what's going to happen. He pressed something on the detonator, and a red light began flashing. 2 minutes. That's how long until the charges in the West Tunnel blow. Emergency Services protocol says you have to evacuate with the civilian. You leave. I keep the dog. Seems fair you took mine. I take yours. Ryan felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Daniels was forcing him to choose between Emily and Max. The tactically correct choice was clear, save the civilian. But leaving Max behind went against everything in him. Max comes with us, Ryan insisted. No. Daniels' voice was ice. The dog stays. That's non-negotiable. Emily suddenly spoke. Her voice small, but clear after days of silence. He remembers you. Both men looked at her in surprise. The dog, she continued, looking at Daniels. He remembers when you were nice to him, before you got mad all the time. Daniels stared at the child, momentarily speechless. How would you know that? Because he's not growling at you. He's growling at the thing in your hand. Emily's observation, simple yet profound, seemed to penetrate Daniel's defenses. Ryan seized the moment, signaling Max with a subtle hand gesture they'd practiced hundreds of times. The German Shepherd immediately dropped from aggressive posture to a relaxed sitting position, head tilted quizzically. "She's right, Frank. Max remembers you. Dogs don't forget people who treated them well." Uncertainty flickered across Daniel's face. "It doesn't matter now. Nothing can change what happened." "You're wrong," Ryan countered. "You can still make the right choice, for Max's sake, if nothing else." The moment hung suspended between them, possibility wavering like a candle flame. Then reality crashed back as shouts echoed through the tunnels, tactical teams closing in. Daniel's expression hardened once more. Opportunity lost. "Time to choose, Shepherd. The girl or the dog?" He thrust Emily forward roughly, causing her to stumble. As she fell, something clattered to the ground from inside her jacket, a small metal object that rolled across the uneven floor. Ryan recognized it instantly, the whistle he'd used during the K9 demonstration at her school. Emily must have kept it all these months. As the realization struck him, Emily met his eyes with a look of desperate intelligence beyond her years. Before either man could react, Emily lunged for the whistle and blew it hard, the high-pitched training signal that commanded Max to perform his most advanced maneuver. Max exploded into action, leaping not directly at Daniels, but at the low ceiling above him. The German Shepherd's momentum and weight struck one of the rotting support beams, sending a shower of dirt and small rocks cascading down on Daniels, momentarily blinding him. Ryan seized the opportunity, diving toward Emily and pulling her away from Daniels. In the same motion, he issued a sharp command, "Max, disarm!" The German Shepherd pivoted mid-recovery, launching toward Daniels with shocking speed. The former officer still held the detonator, thumb pressed firmly on the dead man's switch. Max's training had prepared him for precisely this scenario, removing weapons without causing their discharge. Daniels saw Max coming and turned to face the attack. "No!" he shouted, raising his free arm defensively. But instead of going for that arm, Max targeted the hand with the detonator, his powerful jaws closing around Daniel's wrist, with scientific precision, applying paralyzing pressure to specific nerves without breaking skin. The pain made Daniels howl, but his thumb remained frozen on the button through sheer desperation. Man and dog grappled in a deadly dance, Daniels trying to shake free while maintaining pressure on the switch, Max adjusting his grip with each movement. Ryan shielded Emily behind a filing cabinet, his mind racing. The detonator's dead man switch meant they couldn't simply knock it from Daniel's hand. They needed to secure it with the button depressed. "Max, hold," Ryan commanded, moving carefully around the struggling pair. The German Shepherd maintained his grip, forcing Daniels to his knees through carefully applied pressure. In that moment, with Daniels distracted by pain and the ongoing struggle with Max, Ryan spotted what he'd been looking for, a second device partially concealed behind the desk. His years of military experience told him immediately what it was: the primary detonator. The handheld device was merely a secondary trigger. A surge of rage went through Ryan. Daniels had been bluffing about the dead man's switch. While it might trigger an explosion, it wasn't the only detonator. The former officer had created a psychological trap, forcing an impossible choice that wasn't actually necessary. "It's over, Frank," Ryan said, approaching carefully. "Let go of the detonator and call off whatever you've planned." Daniel's eyes blazed with desperate fury. "It'll never be over, not until they understand what they took from me." With a sudden, violent motion, Daniels wrenched his arm upward, breaking Max's grip. In the same movement, he drew something from his jacket, a small caliber pistol, aimed not at Ryan but directly at Max's head. The gunshot echoed deafeningly in the confined space. Max yelped, a sound that tore through Ryan's heart like physical pain. The German shepherd dropped to the ground, blood instantly soaking the fur around his face. "No!" Ryan lunged forward, but Daniels swung the gun toward Emily. "Stay back!" Daniels shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "It didn't have to be this way. I just wanted what was mine." On the floor, Max lay motionless, blood pooling beneath his head. Ryan felt as though he'd been hollowed out, grief and rage warring within him. Emily stood frozen behind the filing cabinet, her face pale with shock. The tunnels trembled suddenly, dust raining down as a distant explosion sent vibrations through the rock. The tactical teams must have encountered one of Daniels's booby traps. Daniels's eyes darted frantically between Ryan, Emily, and the fallen dog. "Too late now," he muttered, his voice taking on an unhinged quality. "Too late for all of us." Ryan saw the madness overtaking Daniels, saw his finger tightening on the trigger again. Time seemed to slow, options flashing through his mind in microseconds. He could dive for Daniels, but not before the man could fire at Emily. He could throw himself in front of the girl, but then they might both die. No good choices remained. Then, impossibly, a blur of motion from the floor. Max, grievously wounded, but not dead, summoned a final surge of strength and lunged upward. His jaws closed not around Daniel's arm this time, but directly on the gun itself, the powerful canine teeth crunching into metal and flesh alike. Daniels screamed as Max dragged him off balance. The gun discharged again, the bullet striking the ceiling. Ryan didn't hesitate, tackling Daniels with full force, driving him to the ground. The gun clattered away as Max maintained his grip, blood streaming from the terrible wound in his face. "Max, release," Ryan commanded, securing Daniel's arms behind his back with practiced movements. The German shepherd obeyed instantly, collapsing to the floor once more, his duty fulfilled. Ryan zip-tied Daniel's wrists, his movements mechanical while his mind screamed in anguish over Max's condition. The dog's breathing was labored, his once alert eyes growing glassy. The bullet had entered at an angle, destroying his right eye and fracturing his jaw. Emily approached cautiously, tears streaming silently down her dirt-streaked face. She knelt beside Max, placing her small hand gently on his heaving side. "You saved me," she whispered, "like Daddy saved Officer Ryan." The simple truth of her words pierced Ryan's professional detachment. He had failed James Collins in life, but his partner had saved James's daughter. There was a symmetry to it that felt like both redemption and unbearable loss. The main detonator behind the desk suddenly emitted a high-pitched beep. The digital display began counting down from 30 seconds. Daniels laughed, a broken sound devoid of sanity. "I told you," he gasped through his pain. "No way out." Ryan moved with desperate speed, examining the device. It was military grade, likely stolen from his days in law enforcement. The wires ran into the wall, connecting to what must be a daisy chain of explosives throughout this section of tunnel. Disarming it would require time they didn't have. "Emily," Ryan said, keeping his voice calm through sheer will, "we need to run. Now." "But Max," the girl protested, her hand still on the wounded dog. "I'll carry him." Ryan gathered the 100-pound German shepherd in his arms, ignoring the searing pain in his shoulder. Max whimpered once, then lay still against Ryan's chest, blood soaking into his uniform. "What about him?" Emily pointed at Daniels, who lay watching them with hateful eyes. Ryan's gaze met Daniels for a final moment. The man who had once been an honored officer, who had raised Max from a puppy, gave a slight nod, understanding passing between them. They both knew Ryan couldn't carry both Max and Daniels to safety in the seconds remaining. "He made his choice," Ryan said, turning away. "Let's go." They ran through the tunnel, Ryan leading the way with Max's bloodied form cradled in his arms, Emily close behind. The countdown in Ryan's head matched his pounding footsteps. 20 seconds. 15. 10. Ahead, flashlight beams cut through the darkness, the tactical team finally arriving. Lieutenant Wilson's voice echoed off the stone walls. "Shepard Collins." "Get back!" Ryan shouted, not slowing. "Explosion imminent!" The tactical team reversed direction immediately, creating a human chain to expedite their retreat. Wilson grabbed Emily as they passed, another officer attempting to take Max from Ryan. "I've got him," Ryan insisted, refusing to relinquish his partner despite his straining muscles and the blood now covering both of them. They rounded a corner as the detonator reached zero. The explosion rocked the tunnel system, the shock wave throwing them forward. Ryan curled his body around Max as they fell, protecting the wounded dog as debris rained down around them. Dust filled the air, choking and blinding. When it cleared, a wall of collapsed rock sealed the passage behind them. Frank Daniels was entombed on the other side, his vendetta ended by his own design. Ryan lay on the ground, still holding Max, the German shepherd's blood pooling beneath them. The dog's breaths came in shallow gasps, each one seeming like it might be the last. "Officer down," Ryan managed, his voice breaking. "Officer down." The tactical team members exchanged glances, understanding that Ryan wasn't referring to himself. One of them keyed his radio. "We need immediate veterinary assistance. K9 officer critically wounded with gunshot to the face. Location Eastern Tunnel exit. Old Oakville Mine." Emily knelt beside Ryan and Max, her small face solemn. "He's not going to die," she said with the absolute certainty only a child could muster. "Heroes don't die." Ryan wished he could share her conviction. But as Max's blood continued to flow, soaking the ground beneath them, he knew they were racing against a clock more unforgiving than any Daniels had set. The journey from the mine entrance to Mercy Animal Hospital was a blur of sirens, radio chatter, and blood. Ryan sat in the back of the police cruiser, Max's massive form cradled in his lap, applying pressure to the horrific facial wound with a tactical bandage. The German shepherd's breathing had grown increasingly shallow, his once powerful body now limp and unresponsive. "Stay with me, partner," Ryan whispered, his voice cracking as he stroked Max's blood-matted fur. "Just a little longer." Officer Tanner drove with lights and sirens blaring, navigating the icy roads with grim determination. In the seat beside Ryan, Emily Collins sat silently, her small face set in a mask of concentration. She had refused to be separated from Max, insisting with stubborn determination that she needed to stay with her rescuer. 3 minutes out, Tanner called over his shoulder. Hospital's been notified. Ryan barely heard him. The world had narrowed to just the labored rise and fall of Max's chest beneath his hands. The bullet had entered at a devastating angle, shattering the orbital bone around the right eye before tearing through the sinus cavity and exiting through the lower jaw. The damage was catastrophic, far beyond anything Ryan had seen in his K-9 medical training. The cruiser skidded to a halt at the emergency entrance of Mercy Animal Hospital, where a team in scrubs waited with a gurney. Ryan recognized Dr. Sarah Mitchell at the forefront, her professional demeanor firmly in place despite the emotional chaos she must be feeling. She had left the rescue scene ahead of them to prepare for Max's arrival, after sharing one brief, tearful reunion with her daughter. GSW to the facial region. Entry through right orbital, exit through mandible, Ryan reported mechanically as he transferred Max to the gurney. His hands and uniform soaked crimson. Pulse weak and thready. Respiration shallow. Approximately 2 units of blood lost. Dr. Mitchell nodded sharply, already examining the wound as her team rushed Max through the doors. CBC, chem panel, type and cross for transfusion, she barked to her staff. Call Dr. Weiss for ophthalmology and Dr. Lawrence for maxillofacial. Ryan moved to follow, but an assistant blocked his path. I'm sorry, Officer Shepard, but you can't go into surgery. We'll update you as soon as we can. He's my partner, Ryan said, the words feeling wholly inadequate to describe what Max meant to him. Emily slipped her small hand into Ryan's blood-stained one. They'll help him, she said with quiet certainty, speaking more words at once than she had in months. My mom fixes animals that nobody else can. Ryan looked down at James Collins's daughter, seeing her father's steadfast confidence in her eyes. He allowed himself to be led to a waiting area, where a nurse provided towels for the blood and checked Emily for injuries. Chief Hayes arrived 30 minutes later, his weathered face grave. Daniels is confirmed dead, he said without preamble. Tactical team recovered his body after clearing the remaining explosives. Ryan nodded, feeling nothing at the news. Frank Daniels had been a troubled man consumed by bitterness, but in the end, he had been a victim of his own making. Any satisfaction in his death was eclipsed by concern for Max. The dog saved both of you, Hayes continued, his gruff voice softening slightly. And you disobeyed a direct order to wait for tactical? Yes, sir. Hayes was quiet for a moment. We recovered Daniel's journal. His plan was extensive. Emily wasn't the only target. He had surveillance on 3 other children of department personnel. He paused. Your actions, while against protocol, likely saved multiple lives. The acknowledgement should have meant something to Ryan, but he could only nod, his thoughts still with Max in the operating room beyond the double doors. 2 hours crawled by. Emily eventually fell asleep against Ryan's side, emotionally and physically exhausted. Social services had arrived but agreed to let her remain until her mother could take a break from surgery. Ryan sat motionless, staring at the doors, barely registering the comings and goings around him. His mind traveled back to their first real mission together. A missing 5-year-old in Cascade National Forest. Freezing rain, darkness falling, hope dwindling. Max had tracked the child for 7 miles through difficult terrain, eventually finding her huddled in a hollowed log, hypothermic but alive. Ryan had carried her while Max led them back to civilization. the German shepherd checking on them frequently with concerned brown eyes, as if making sure his humans were following correctly. The surgery doors finally swung open. Dr. Mitchell emerged, surgical cap still on, exhaustion evident in the slump of her shoulders. Ryan stood immediately, careful not to wake Emily. "He's alive," she said before Ryan could ask. "But barely." She led Ryan to a small consultation room, her surgical gown stained with Max's blood. "The bullet did extensive damage. We've stabilized the hemorrhaging and removed bone fragments. But—" She hesitated, professional detachment wavering. "Officer Shepard, the injuries are catastrophic. His right eye couldn't be saved. His jaw is shattered beyond normal repair. The trauma to his sinus cavity and nasal structure is severe." Ryan felt each word like a physical blow. "But he'll recover." Dr. Mitchell's expression conveyed what her words couldn't. "In cases like this, with working animals, we typically discuss quality of life considerations." The implication hung in the air between them. "You're talking about euthanasia," Ryan said flatly. "With injuries this severe, recovery would be long, painful, and uncertain. He would never work as a K9 again. He would likely have chronic pain, difficulty eating, possible neurological complications." She paused, seeing the devastation in Ryan's face. "I'm not making a recommendation yet. I'm just preparing you for difficult conversations ahead." Ryan's throat tightened. "Can I see him?" She nodded, leading him through the recovery area to an intensive care unit. Max lay on a treatment table, surrounded by monitoring equipment. His face was almost unrecognizable, heavily bandaged on the right side, with drainage tubes and an IV line. His eye, what remained of it, had been completely removed. His shattered jaw was temporarily stabilized with external fixators that protruded grotesquely from the skin. A ventilator assisted his breathing with mechanical precision. Ryan approached slowly, placing a gentle hand on Max's chest, feeling the reassuring heartbeat beneath his fingers. "Hey, boy," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "You did good. So good. The hospital administrator wants to speak with you." Dr. Mitchell said quietly, "About expenses." Ryan nodded without looking away from Max. He already knew what that conversation would entail. Police departments had policies about K9 medical care. Reasonable treatment was covered, but there were limits. Extensive reconstructive surgeries, prolonged intensive care, and long-term rehabilitation for a dog that would never return to duty would likely exceed those limits. Mr. Anderson, the hospital administrator, was apologetic but direct. "The initial stabilization is covered by the department's insurance," he explained, reviewing figures on a clipboard. "But the reconstructive surgeries Dr. Mitchell believes are necessary would cost upwards of $30,000, with no guarantee of success. I understand your attachment to the animal, but from a practical standpoint—" "He's not an animal," Ryan interrupted, his voice low. "He's an officer who was shot in the line of duty, saving a child's life." Anderson's expression was sympathetic but unmoved. "I understand, but the policy is clear. In cases where medical costs exceed $10,000 for a K9 who cannot return to duty, the department's approved course of action is humane euthanasia." The clinical language made Ryan's stomach turn. Humane euthanasia. as if there was anything humane about ending Max's life because of budget concerns. "That's not happening," Ryan said flatly. "I'll pay for it myself." "Officer Shepard, the surgeries alone would cost more than most people make in a year. Not to mention the rehabilitation, specialized care, medications. I don't care what it costs. I'll sell my house if I have to." Ryan left the administrator's office and returned to Max's side. The German Shepherd remained unconscious, machines monitoring his vital signs with soft, rhythmic beeps. Ryan sank into a chair beside the treatment table, the weight of the day finally crashing down on him. Chief Hayes found him there an hour later. The older man stood awkwardly in the doorway, his usual commanding presence diminished in the clinical setting. "Anderson told me about the costs," Hayes said, "and the department's policy limitations." Ryan didn't respond, his hand resting protectively on Max's uninjured side. "I've spoken with the mayor and the city council," Hayes continued. "The policy stands." The finality in Hayes's voice tore through Ryan's last reserves of professional composure. "So that's it. After everything he's done, everything he's given, we just put him down because it's not cost-effective to save him." "That's not what I said." Hayes stepped fully into the room. "The department can't fund this level of care, but there might be another option." Ryan looked up, a spark of hope kindling. "The Collins girl has been talking. First word she's spoken in months, according to her therapist. She's been telling everyone about the brave dog that saved her. The local news got wind of it." Hayes shifted uncomfortably, clearly venturing beyond his typical by-the-book approach. "There's been an outpouring of support, people wanting to help." The chief handed Ryan a printout, a hastily created online fundraising page titled Save K9 Hero Max. The goal was set at $50,000. The current total, barely 3 hours after creation, was $4,312. "It's not department sanctioned," Hayes added quickly, "but no one's going to stop it." Ryan stared at the page, throat tight. The amount was still far short of what would be needed, and there was no guarantee they'd reach the goal. But it was something, a lifeline, however tenuous. As Hayes left, Ryan turned back to his partner. "Hear that? Max, seems like you've got a whole town pulling for you." He gently stroked the undamaged side of the dog's face. "But you need to fight too. Can you do that for me, buddy? Can you fight?" Max remained unresponsive, his damaged body giving no sign that he heard or understood. The machines continued their mechanical vigilance, indifferent to the life they monitored hanging by the thinnest of threads. The first surgery had stopped the bleeding. The second, performed at 2 a.m. with Dr. Mitchell working well outside hospital protocols, had removed bone fragments threatening Max's brain. But it was the third surgery, 14 hours after Max had been shot, that would determine whether the German Shepherd had any chance at recovery. Ryan sat in the same waiting room chair he had occupied for nearly 16 hours, leaving only for brief restroom breaks and to change out of his blood-soaked uniform into scrubs provided by the hospital. Coffee cups littered the table beside him, sustenance forgotten as he stared at the operating room doors. He had never felt so powerless, not even in Afghanistan, when an IED had nearly claimed his life. "Officer Shepard," a tentative voice drew Ryan from his thoughts. He looked up to find a woman in her mid-50s with kind eyes and a press badge. "I'm Diane Mercer from the Oakville Gazette. I was hoping to speak with you about Max." Ryan's first instinct was to refuse, but something in her expression made him pause. What about him? The community is rallying around his story, she explained, sitting beside him. The fundraiser has reached $22,000 already, but we need more exposure to hit the goal. A first-hand account from his partner would make all the difference. 22,000. The number registered dimly in Ryan's exhausted mind. Nowhere near enough, but more than he had dared hope for so quickly. I'm not much for interviews, he said, rubbing his face. I understand, Diane replied gently. But this isn't about publicity. It's about saving your partner. Something in her tone reached through Ryan's fog of fatigue and worry. You have a dog, don't you? She smiled sadly. Had a rescue German Shepherd mix named Buddy, 17 years together before cancer took him last spring. She touched Ryan's arm lightly. I know that look in your eyes. It's the same one I had sitting in my vet's office. Ryan found himself opening up to this stranger, who somehow wasn't a stranger at all. He told her about finding Max at the shelter, about their training together, about the nightmares from Afghanistan that only Max seemed able to quiet. He described missions they'd completed, lives they'd saved, the wordless communication that had developed between them over years of partnership. He's never let me down, Ryan concluded, voice rough with emotion. Not once, and I won't let him down now, Diane wrote quickly, occasionally asking clarifying questions. As they talked, Ryan gradually became aware of others in the waiting room, uniformed officers from his department and neighboring jurisdictions. Some he knew and others he'd never met, all sitting quietly in solidarity. Chief Hayes returned as Diane was finishing her interview. The older man looked as though he had aged years in a single day, his usual commanding presence diminished by exhaustion. Thought you should know, he said to Ryan after the reporter left. The fundraiser just got a $10,000 anonymous donation. A spark of hope flickered in Ryan's chest. That puts us over 30,000. Hayes nodded, lowering himself heavily into a chair. I've been making some calls. K-9 associations across the state are organizing their own efforts. He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. The administrator mentioned euthanasia. That's not happening, Ryan said flatly. I know. Hayes surprised Ryan by agreeing. I didn't say anything earlier, but... He pulled out his wallet and extracted a worn photograph, a younger Hayes in uniform standing beside a black Labrador. Ranger, my first partner, took a knife meant for me during a domestic. The department had the same policy back then. Understanding dawned on Ryan. This explained Hayes's emotional distance, his by-the-book approach to the K-9 program. What happened? I followed procedure. Hayes's voice was hollow with remembered pain. I let them euthanize him because the policy said it was the right thing to do. I've regretted it every day for 20 years. The two men sat in silence, united by the unique bond that existed between handlers and their K-9 partners, a connection outsiders could never fully comprehend. There's something else you should know, Hayes said finally. We found more evidence at Daniel's residence, photos, surveillance notes. He wasn't just targeting Emily, he had information on children of 5 other officers. The implications sank in slowly. Max didn't just save Emily. No, Hayes confirmed. He likely prevented multiple abductions. The county prosecutor is calling it the most significant prevention of potential child endangerment in the state's history. This revelation should have provided some comfort, some validation of Max's sacrifice. But Ryan found it only intensified his anxiety. The operation room doors remained closed, Max's fate hanging in the balance beyond them. Another hour passed. Officers came and went, bringing food Ryan couldn't eat and updates on the fundraiser that had now spread across social media. The mayor had issued a statement honoring Max's bravery. Local businesses were organizing additional fundraising events. Then, unexpectedly, Emily arrived with a social worker. The 7-year-old looked vastly different from the traumatized child Ryan had carried from the mine. Her face was clean, her hair neatly brushed, and she clutched a large envelope to her chest. She approached Ryan with solemn determination. "Is Max still getting fixed?" she asked. Ryan nodded, finding his voice. "The doctors are doing everything they can." Emily handed him the envelope. "I made something for him." Inside were dozens of drawings, each depicting Max as a superhero dog with a cape. The artwork showed surprising skill for a child her age, capturing Max's likeness with remarkable accuracy. "These are amazing," Ryan said, genuinely impressed. "Max will love them." Emily's serious expression didn't waver. "My mom says drawing helps when you're scared or sad." She hesitated, then asked the question that clearly weighed on her mind. "Is Max going to die because he saved me?" The directness of the question, delivered with a child's unflinching honesty, caught Ryan off guard. He wanted to offer reassurance, to tell her everything would be fine. But something in her steady gaze demanded truth. "I don't know," he admitted. "He's hurt very badly, but a lot of people are working very hard to help him." Emily considered this, then reached into her pocket and pulled out something small and metal, the whistle she had used in the mine. "This helped before. Maybe it will help again." She placed it in Ryan's hand, curling his fingers around it. "Tell him I'm sorry he got hurt because of me." "No," Ryan said firmly. "None of this is your fault. Max was doing his job protecting people. That's what he was born to do. He would make the same choice again." The operating room doors finally swung open after nearly 9 hours of surgery. Dr. Mitchell emerged, still in surgical scrubs, looking utterly drained. The room fell silent as she approached Ryan. "We've done everything we could," she began, her voice clinical but gentle. "Removed the damaged eye, reconstructed his jaw using titanium plates, repaired what we could of the nasal structure and sinus cavities." She paused, fatigue evident in every line of her body. "The next 24 hours will be critical. If he survives that long, his chances improve. When will we know if—" Ryan couldn't finish the question. "If the surgeries were successful." Dr. Mitchell shook her head slightly. "It's too soon to tell. Best case scenario, he'll have significant facial disfigurement, loss of his right eye, and will require special care for eating and drinking for the rest of his life. Worst case," she didn't need to elaborate. "Can I see him, Doctor?" Mitchell nodded, leading Ryan through the double doors to the recovery area. Max lay on a treatment table, surrounded by monitoring equipment. His face was almost completely covered in bandages, with drainage tubes and an IV delivering fluids and medication. His chest rose and fell with shallow, assisted breaths. "Talk to him," Dr. Mitchell suggested softly. "He may be able to hear you." Ryan approached slowly, placing a gentle hand on the undamaged portion of Max's chest. "Hey, partner," he whispered. "You did it. You saved Emily. You saved a lot of kids. His voice caught. I need you to fight a little longer, okay? Just keep fighting. If Max heard, he gave no sign. The monitors continued their steady beeping, the only indication that life remained in the broken body. When Ryan returned to the waiting area, he found a news crew setting up equipment. Diane Mercer approached him quickly. I know this is a difficult time, she said apologetically, but we're doing a live segment on Max for the evening news. The surgeon said you might consider a brief statement. The fundraiser is at $38,000 now. This could push it over the top. Ryan hesitated, torn between his natural aversion to publicity and the desperate need for funds to cover Max's continuing care, before he could decide. Chief Hayes spoke from behind him. I'll do it, the chief said, straightening his uniform. Official department statement? The interview was brief but powerful. Hayes, usually so reserved and formal, spoke with unexpected emotion about Max's heroism, about the lives saved and the debt owed. He finished by announcing that the City Council had unanimously voted to award Max the Medal of Valor, the highest honor available to a police officer. This dog exemplifies everything we aspire to be as officers, Hayes concluded, looking directly into the camera. Courage, loyalty, selflessness. Max didn't just save lives yesterday. He reminded us what it means to serve. The piece aired on the evening news and was immediately shared across social media platforms. By midnight, the fundraiser had exceeded its goal, reaching $62,415 from over 2,000 individual donations, but money couldn't guarantee survival. As the adrenaline of the rescue and subsequent media attention faded, the harsh reality of Max's condition remained. During the third night after the shooting, his heart stopped. The veterinary team performed CPR for 11 minutes before restoring a heartbeat. Dr. Mitchell warned Ryan to prepare for the worst. Yet, somehow, Max clung to life, day after day, defying medical expectations. The German Shepherd's condition gradually stabilized. His vital signs strengthened. The risk of infection decreased. After a week, he was breathing on his own. On the 10th day after the shooting, as Ryan sat beside Max reading the countless cards and letters that had arrived from across the country, he felt something he had begun to fear he would never feel again. Max's tail thumping weakly against the treatment table. Max. Ryan's voice caught in his throat. The dog's remaining eye opened slightly, unfocused at first, then gradually tracking toward the sound of his partner's voice. Recognition flickered in the brown depths. Ryan pressed the call button repeatedly until Dr. Mitchell arrived, breathless with concern. What happened? He's awake, Ryan said, tears streaming freely down his face. He knows me. Dr. Mitchell checked Max's vital signs, her professional demeanor slipping to reveal cautious optimism. This is remarkable. Based on the brain scans, we weren't sure if he'd retain full cognitive function. Max's tail thumped again, weak but unmistakable. Does this mean he'll recover? Ryan asked, hope warring with caution in his voice. It means he's fighting, Dr. Mitchell replied, her expression softening as she gazed at the wounded animal who had saved her daughter. And for the first time, I think he might be winning. The news of Max's improvement spread rapidly through the hospital and beyond. Emily, who had begun speaking more with each passing day, insisted on visiting. After consulting with Max's medical team, Dr. Mitchell agreed to a brief, carefully controlled visit. No one could have predicted how this meeting, arranged for the 21st day after the shooting, would affect everyone involved. The 21st day dawned clear and cold in Oakville. Sunlight streamed through the windows of Mercy Animal Hospital, casting long rectangles of light across the polished floors. The usual bustle of the veterinary center had been temporarily suspended, an unusual hush falling over the normally busy hallways. Staff moved with deliberate quietness, speaking in hushed tones as they prepared for what many had come to call the meeting. Ryan Shepherd arrived early, freshly showered and wearing his dress uniform for the first time since the rescue. The formal attire felt stiff and uncomfortable after weeks in casual clothes, but today's occasion demanded it. He carried a small paper bag containing items he'd carefully selected the night before. "Morning, Ryan." Dr. Mitchell greeted him, emerging from her office. The past 3 weeks had created a first-name basis between them, their shared vigil over Max and Emily breaking down professional barriers. "How are you holding up?" "Nervous," he admitted. "How is he today?" "Remarkably alert. His morning check showed improved vital signs across the board." She hesitated before adding, "I've prepared Emily as best I could for what she'll see. The bandages, the missing eye, the facial reconstruction. It's still shocking, even for medical professionals." And Ryan nodded, understanding her concern. "She's stronger than we think. James was like that too, rock solid when things got tough." Sarah touched his arm briefly, a gesture that had become familiar between them. Emily slept through the night for the first time since the rescue. No nightmares. Her therapist believes this meeting could be a turning point for her recovery. They walked together to the hospital's small conference room, now transformed for this special occasion. The medical equipment had been minimized as much as possible, monitors pushed against walls and unnecessary tubing removed. Staff had placed children's artwork along the walls, dozens of pictures from Emily's classmates and local children, all featuring heroic depictions of Max. Chief Hayes was already there, along with Mayor Richardson and several off-duty officers. A photographer from the Oakville Gazette stood discreetly in one corner. His presence negotiated after considerable discussion about privacy versus the community's investment in Max's recovery. "Everything ready?" Hayes asked, uncharacteristically fidgeting with his uniform buttons. Ryan nodded. "Dr. Weiss says we should keep it to 10 minutes maximum. Max still tires easily." The chief cleared his throat. "The department received something this morning. Thought you might want it for today." He handed Ryan a small velvet box. Inside lay a miniature version of the Medal of Valor, modified to attach to a K9 collar, alongside a formal citation signed by the governor. "This is," Ryan began, words failing him. "Official," Hayes finished. "First K9 in state history to receive the full medal, not just the handler's commendation." At precisely 10 a.m., a veterinary technician appeared at the door. "We're ready to bring Max in." The room fell silent as 2 staff members carefully wheeled in a specially modified gurney. Max lay upon it, his body thin from weeks of limited nutrition, but his remaining eye alert and tracking the movements around him. The right side of his face remained heavily bandaged, with only small portions of the extensive reconstruction visible. A special padded brace supported his rebuilt jaw, and a feeding tube extended from his neck a necessary measure until he could eat normally again. Despite these sobering medical realities, Max's tail thumped weakly against the padding when he spotted Ryan, his good ear perking forward. "Hey, buddy," Ryan said softly, moving to the dog's side and gently placing a hand on his front paw. "You've got some visitors today." The door opened again, and Emily Collins entered, clutching her mother's hand. The 7-year-old had spent hours selecting her outfit, a blue dress with a pattern of small paw prints, her blonde hair pulled back with a ribbon. In her free hand, she carried a small handmade medal fashioned from gold-painted cardboard attached to a blue ribbon, along with an envelope. Emily stopped abruptly when she saw Max, her blue eyes widening at the extent of his injuries. Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand encouragingly, but didn't rush her. Everyone in the room seemed to hold their breath, waiting. Max's reaction broke the tension. The German shepherd's entire demeanor changed at the sight of Emily. His tail began to wag with more energy than he had shown since the shooting, and he made a small whining sound in his throat, struggling to raise his head higher. Emily released her mother's hand and approached slowly, her gaze never leaving Max's face. When she reached the gurney, she stood silent for a long moment, studying the bandages, the missing eye, the medical equipment. "You still look brave," she finally said, her voice small but clear in the hushed room. "Even with your owie." Something in the simple, childlike assessment brought tears to the eyes of every adult present. Ryan knelt beside Emily, bringing himself to her eye level. "Would you like to give Max your present?" he asked gently. Emily nodded, holding up the handmade medal. "I made this for you," she told Max solemnly. "It says Hero Dog on it, because you saved me." Ryan carefully took the medal and attached it to the light blanket covering Max. The German shepherd's eye remained fixed on Emily, as if nothing else in the room existed. "I wrote you a letter, too," Emily continued, opening the envelope and extracting a carefully printed page. "My therapist said I should write down what I want to say so I don't forget." She cleared her throat with endearing seriousness and began to read. "Dear Max, thank you for saving me from the bad man. Mommy says you got hurt because you were protecting me. I'm sorry you lost your eye and got your face broken. But I think you look like a superhero now, because you have battle scars." Emily paused, glancing up to make sure Max was listening before continuing. "Before you saved me, I didn't talk because I was scared all the time. I thought if I was really quiet, nothing bad would happen. But then, bad things happened anyway. You taught me that being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when you're super scared. That's what Daddy always said, too." At the mention of James Collins, Ryan felt his throat tighten. He caught Sarah's eye across the room, seeing the same emotion reflected there. "I'm talking again now," Emily continued, "because if you could fight the bad man and still be brave even when you got hurt, then I can be brave too. Thank you for being my hero. Max. Love, Emily." When she finished reading, Emily carefully folded the letter and tucked it beneath Max's front paw. Then, with the natural instinct of a child who sees beyond medical equipment and grievous injuries, she leaned forward and gently kissed the unbandaged side of Max's face. Max's response brought audible gasps from around the room, despite his injuries, despite the pain he must still be feeling. The German shepherd struggled to move closer to Emily. With tremendous effort, he lifted his head and inched forward until he could lightly touch her cheek with his nose, the K9 equivalent of a kiss. Emily wrapped her arms carefully around his neck, mindful of the tubes and bandages. "I love you, Max," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Hardened police officers wiped tears away openly. Chief Hayes stood with his face averted, shoulders shaking slightly. "Doctor." Mitchell pressed her hand to her mouth. Professional detachment completely abandoned. The photographer from the Gazette captured the moment with quiet clicks of his camera, a wounded hero and the child he had saved, connected by something deeper than words could express. As Emily stepped back, Ryan attached the official Medal of Valor to Max's temporary collar. "For extraordinary heroism and selfless courage in the face of imminent danger," he recited, voice breaking on the words. Max's eye moved from Emily to Ryan, then back again, as if understanding the significance of the moment. His tail thumped steadily against the gurney, no longer weak, but purposeful. In that moment, everyone present understood what true healing looked like. It wasn't just about surgeries and medication, physical therapy and rehabilitation. It was about connection, purpose, and the knowledge that sacrifice meant something. Emily smiled a full, genuine smile that transformed her face. "See," she said to the room at large, "I told you heroes don't die." In a world that often seems to value efficiency over loyalty, Max's story reminds us of what truly matters. This brave German shepherd, who took a bullet to save a child he barely knew, embodies the values our generation holds dear: sacrifice, duty, and unwavering commitment. Many of us remember a time when these virtues weren't just buzzwords, but the foundation of our communities. Like Max, perhaps you've faced your own battles, carrying invisible scars from sacrifices made for family, country, or strangers. Maybe you've wondered if those sacrifices were noticed or valued in today's fast-paced world. When hospital administrators suggested euthanizing Max because he was no longer useful, it struck a chord because we sometimes fear being judged the same way as we age. But remember how the community rallied around this wounded hero, recognizing worth beyond utility. Remember Emily's innocent wisdom. You still look brave, even with your owie. Max's story isn't just about a dog. It's about honoring those who've given pieces of themselves for others, acknowledging that our battle scars don't diminish